Open world games are among the most popular, but with state-of-the-art graphics and densely populated environments, many of the best open world games are impossible to run on lower-end PCs. Thankfully, however, some golden oldies still run great on old PCs or laptops, and there are even some more modern games built with lower-spec PC players in mind. While some of these games circumvent the need for a powerful operating system in creative ways, such as by using procedural generation, others simply make up for subpar graphics with outstanding gameplay and story. What is for sure is that players on low-end PCs still have access to some great open-world games. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is widely regarded as one of the best RPGs ever created, and even to this day its beauty endures. Surprisingly, the minimum requirements for The Witcher 3 aren't too high at all, with many older or less powerful machines perfectly capable of running it. While players might not be able to turn on the best graphics settings, the game looks great regardless, in a large part thanks to its magnificent color design. Additionally, it is the story and characters that make The Witcher 3 so great, with memorable voice acting and decisions that truly matter. Fighting monsters or humans is also incredibly satisfying with either of Geralt's swords or his magic abilities. While players on lower-end PCs and laptops likely won't be able to run the sequel, the original Dragon's Dogma is an ideal alternative and still a great game. The most iconic element of this medieval fantasy RPG is the pawn system, where players make and recruit NPCs to fight alongside them. This adds a new element of camaraderie to the game and almost makes it feel like a co-op game enjoyed with friends. The exploration is also some of the best, with players encouraged to discover their own adventures rather than mindlessly follow map markers. Seeing as it was released in 2001, the original Gothic game is one of the easiest open-world games to run on any machine. With a remake on the way boasting lifelike graphics that only new PCs will be able to run, it can be a great time for people to check out the game that helped define a genre. The Gothic series as a whole is known for featuring a real lived-in world where NPCs have jobs, a place to sleep, a need to eat, and so much more. Despite the map being fairly small, it also manages to pack an incredible amount of content, which is ripe for exploring. This makes it one of the open-world games with the most dense maps, but in a way that works perfectly. As a medieval fantasy game, players can expect all sorts of melee weapons and spells to fight with. At first glance, Terraria might not appear to be an open-world game, and it may not be what every player is looking for. However, the reviews and longevity of this title speak for themselves. Another undeniable fact is that Terraria is one of the easiest open-world games to run on a bad or old PC, with it barely having any requirements, and as a bonus, it only takes up a small amount of storage, coming in at just 200 MB. This is all thanks to its 2D pixel art style and fantastic optimization behind the scenes. In terms of gameplay, Terraria can somewhat be thought of as a 2D version of Minecraft, but arguably with better combat and action. As an open-world sandbox game, players can do almost anything they desire with exploration, building, fighting, and even digging, all forming core parts of the experience. Building houses, cities, and much more is certainly one of the main reasons players keep coming back, and why sessions can extend for hours upon hours, especially when enjoying Terraria with friends. Open world games don't have to be set in expansive 3D worlds with realistic graphics, and in fact, some of the most popular examples utilize beautiful 2D or low poly 3D visuals alongside their gripping gameplay loops. These games also have the huge benefit of performing great on laptops or low-end PCs. Project Zomboid fits nicely into this category and has been entertaining players for over a decade, constantly asking them how they will die in their next playthrough. This open-world zombie survival game may look simple at first, but the amount of depth is truly staggering, and players can expect hardcore RPG mechanics that go as far as incurring depression and boredom in characters who begin to struggle with the mental health side of a zombie apocalypse. Other intriguing features of the game include a realistic line of sight mechanic, in-depth hearing systems, and continuous servers where players will find the bodies of those who came before them, with each body telling a graphic tale. In terms of performance, there are few requirements, and the only problems players may run into on very low-end software are with super large hordes of zombies, although for obvious reasons avoiding hordes is already preferable. Minecraft is a gaming staple, and thanks to its iconic blocky design, it also happens to be one of the best games for low-end PCs. On top of being able to run the sandbox game on practically anything, players will also be relieved at barely giving up any of their precious storage space, as the initial download is only around 1 GB. However, it should be noted that this can increase as players make more worlds. What players get up to in Minecraft is completely up to them, as while it is technically a survival game, many prefer to create their own worlds or even games. Over the years, the community has achieved some truly remarkable feats, such as fully recreating iconic worlds that anyone can jump into and explore. Far Cry 3 is considered by many to be the best of the bunch from the Far Cry series, and at the very least is up there. It also happens to run beautifully on low-end computers, in part because it was released way back in 2012, but also thanks to solid optimization. In terms of setting, players find themselves on a tropical island overrun with lawlessness, and the only way to escape is to fight. On top of the stellar FPS gameplay, players can also expect a vivid narrative that is punctuated by a superbly well-written villain, Vas Montenegro. Palworld is an example of a modern game that works pretty well on low-end PCs. It is also a game that exploded in popularity upon its early access release thanks to nostalgic and wacky gameplay that reminds players of the fun they had growing up playing classics. While technically a survival game, the heart of Palworld is very much the pals that inhabit the world. Players can capture these pals to use in combat, or they can allocate them to work at the base, where they will perform a variety of functions based on their skills. Despite the game's cartoonish graphics that make it viable on low-end machines, Palworld is oddly dark at times, but in a way that usually results in surprise and laughter. While The Forest now has a sequel, Sons of the Forest, the original, is arguably just as good with the added benefit of running much better on lower-end computers. In this survival horror game, players crash land on an island dominated by a large forest which soon turns out to be inhabited by unwelcoming cannibals. While the game is naturally more beautiful and immersive with better graphics settings, players on old PCs will still be just as terrified each time they leave camp. Would-be survivors must use all the tools available to them and get creative when the heat starts to turn up. Valheim is an open-world survival game inspired by Norse mythology and folklore, and also happens to be one of the best games that can be played on low-end PCs. Despite how large the world is that players can gradually explore, Valheim only takes up 1 GB of storage since it is a procedurally generated game. The game's unique art style not only makes it easy to run, even on max graphics, but also works perfectly with the overall vibe and is quite beautiful in its own way, almost like a painting. With an emphasis on natural exploration, Valheim is the perfect game to go into blind, with players able to find new resources and items that can be combined in creative ways. As a sandbox game, what players do with their time in Midgard is up to them, with some players becoming fully engrossed in the intuitive building system and others playing out their own Viking adventures. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim is one of the most influential games of all time and sets up the next generation of open-world adventures. Thankfully, for players with low-end PCs, this classic is very much playable, seeing as it was designed for the PCs of 2011 when the game was released. While on the other end of the stick, there are some fantastic Skyrim mods that completely transform it for those lucky enough to run the game on the best graphics cards. There are also some performance and optimization mods that make the iconic RPG run even better on laptops and outdated PCs. Batman Arkham City is one of the best superhero games of all time, and despite being an open-world game with a densely filled map full of fun, it still runs great on low-end machines. The game's combat flows beautifully as players deliver justice with both of the Dark Knight's fists, and yet simultaneously feel like it was ripped out of the pages of a comic book. If players enjoy this installment, and it runs well on their PC, then they will likely also love Arkham Asylum and Arkham Origins, whereas the more recent Arkham Knight is best played on higher-end PCs. The Fallout franchise is one of the most iconic in the gaming world, and arguably one of the best installments, especially for players with older computers, is Fallout New Vegas. One of the reasons why this game is so loved is the fact that it is a true RPG, giving players more freedom than ever in the series. The post-nuclear Fallout world of New Vegas is absolutely brutal, with warring factions fighting for control of the city and the surrounding areas. Players will find themselves positively enthralled in the gripping story, which can conclude in a few different ways.